Imagine waking up one day to find that the US dollar is no longer the dominant global currency. It may seem like a far-fetched scenario, but the truth is, de-dollarization is already underway. Countries around the world are diversifying their foreign reserves, and investors are increasingly looking for alternative assets to protect their wealth. But what exactly is de-dollarization? And what does it mean for the global economy? You're watching Wealthy Buddha, and today we're exploring the growing trend of de-dollarization. During World War I, the US dollar took over from the British pound sterling as the world's dominant currency. Since the United States had a lesser role in the First World War, they did not suffer the same economic hardships as Europe. While the British economy had been weakened by the cost of the war and was facing high levels of inflation and unemployment, the US instead emerged from the war as a major industrial and economic power, with a rapidly growing economy and a strong banking system. The US was also not only the largest producer of gold at the time, but had also seen an influx of gold from Europe by exporting wartime materials and weapons to European countries. As a result, many countries began to hold their foreign reserves in US dollars rather than British pounds. The Bretton Woods Agreement, signed in 1944, was designed to create a stable international monetary system in the aftermath of World War II. Under the agreement, the US dollar was designated as the international reserve currency, and many countries agreed to peg their currencies to the dollar, including Japan, Germany, France, and Italy. This meant that the values of these currencies were fixed to a specific exchange rate with the US dollar, which allowed them to maintain stable exchange rates and facilitate international trade and investment. The dollar itself was pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. The US was the world's largest economy at this time and had significant political and military power, which gave the US a strong bargaining position in negotiations and helped to ensure that other countries would agree to the use of the dollar as the international reserve currency. Overall, the Bretton Woods Agreement was successful in creating a stable international monetary system for several decades. However, by the 1970s, the system had become unsustainable. During the 1960s, the US was running large trade deficits due to the cost of the Vietnam War and increased government spending. This led to inflation and a decline in the value of the dollar, which prompted other countries to start questioning the stability of the Bretton Woods system. There was also a growing demand for gold from foreign governments, which were exchanging their US dollars for gold. This put pressure on US gold reserves, and it became clear that the US would eventually run out of gold if the trend continued. To address these issues, President Richard Nixon announced the end of the gold standard in August of 1971. This meant that foreign governments could no longer exchange their US dollars for gold, and the US dollar was no longer backed by a fixed amount of gold. Instead, the US dollar became a fiat currency, meaning that its value was not backed by a physical commodity. This also effectively put an end to the Bretton Woods system. The decision to end the gold standard was not without controversy. Critics argued that it would lead to inflation and a decline in the value of the US dollar, which would hurt American consumers and businesses. On the other hand, supporters of the move argued that it would give the US more flexibility in managing its economy, and that the fixed exchange rate system was no longer viable in the face of global economic changes. In the years following the end of the gold standard, the US dollar's value did decline in relation to other currencies. However, the US economy also experienced periods of growth and stability, and the US dollar has remained the dominant global reserve currency, for now. The US dollar has seen a pretty tumultuous 10 to 15 years, starting with the 2008 financial crisis, which was one of the most severe economic crises in modern history. As a result, the Federal Reserve embarked on a program of quantitative easing, which involved buying trillions of dollars of assets to increase the amount of money in circulation, and lowering interest rates to stimulate the economy. However, increasing the money supply in the US also led to inflation, declining the value of the dollar. Sound familiar? We are currently in the midst of a financial crisis as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which the Federal Reserve took the same steps of quantitative easing, then raising interest rates to combat the resulting inflationary pressures. All of this has led to a decrease in the confidence of the stability of the dollar in countries all over the world, which is the first reason why we're now seeing this de-dollarization trend in full swing. Another major reason for this trend is the fact that the US has been weaponizing the power of the US dollar for many decades. The United States is known for imposing sanctions on countries it considers to be acting against its interests. A sanction is a penalty or punishment that is imposed on a country, organization, or individual to encourage compliance with a particular law or policy, and it can take various forms, including trade restrictions, financial penalties, and asset freezes. For example, the U.S. has used sanctions and the threat of sanctions to force countries to reduce their imports of Iranian oil in an effort to isolate Iran. One of the most prominent examples of U.S. sanctions in recent news is the sanctions imposed on Russia following its annexation of Crimea and involvement in the conflict in Ukraine. The U.S. and its allies in Europe implemented a range of economic sanctions that targeted key sectors of the Russian economy, including finance, energy, and arms export. These sanctions made it difficult for Russia to access international financial markets and trade with other countries, and has had a significant impact on the Russian economy. In response, Russia has had no choice but to take a number of measures to reduce its dependence on the US dollar and the Western financial system. Not only have they increased their direct trade with China by a significant amount since the start of the war, particularly in the energy sector, but they have also, along with China, been buying gold in large quantities. Since the imposition of sanctions, Russia has been one of the largest buyers of gold in the world, adding to its reserves at a steady pace. Because of this, the sanctions imposed on Russia in response to the war can be seen as a major turning point towards de-dollarization. But Russia and China aren't the only countries that have been taking steps to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. For the first time in 48 years, Saudi Arabia has said that the oil-rich nation is open to trading in currencies besides the US dollar. Last month, China and Brazil also announced that they had come to an agreement to trade with each other in their local currencies. The UAE and India are also in talks to use rupees to trade non-oil commodities. Countries in Southeast Asia are also de-dollarizing. Representatives of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, otherwise known as ASEAN, met in Indonesia on March 28th to discuss reducing dependence on the US dollar, euro, yen, and British pound, and move to settlements in local currencies. Brazil and Argentina have even discussed the creation of a common currency for the two countries, allowing them to band together as the two largest economies in South America. Case in point, de-dollarization is well underway and is sure to continue to accelerate. But what does that mean for the future of the United States? While it's difficult to predict the exact implications of the global effort to reduce the dominance of the dollar, one thing for certain is that the Federal Reserve will have much less power than it does today. This means in part that their habit of printing money will have much larger consequences than it does now, including the potential of hyperinflation, leading to a significant drop in the value of the US dollar. However, while the loss of the US dollar's status as the primary reserve currency could have significant economic consequences, it does not necessarily mean that the United States would lose its status as a major political and economic power. For example, despite losing its status as the primary reserve currency after World War II, the UK still maintained its position as a significant player in the global economic and political landscape. The US has many strengths that will likely allow it to remain a leading player on the world stage. The US economy is one of the largest and most diverse in the world, with many sectors such as technology and healthcare leading the way in innovation and growth. Nevertheless, the de-dollarization trend will lead to some significant changes in the balance of power throughout the world. It will be interesting, to say the least, to see how these changes unfold. We hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And from all of us here at Wealthy Buddha, thanks for watching.